Hi, I'm Ian Griffiths, and this is a talk from the Building Business Applications with Silverlight series. In this talk, we're going to look at elevated trust. This is applications that can opt to do certain things which would normally be out of bounds for a Silverlight application. This is only available to out-of-browser applications that request it, and the user has to consent. Just to be clear, elevated trust does not mean that the application will have administrative privileges. Elevated trust simply means relative to the usual very restrictive sandbox that Silverlight imposes. It disables certain sandbox features, enabling the application to do things that are still constrained by the user account privileges in Windows or OS X. So this is simply taking down some of the additional barriers that Silverlight normally puts in place. So, elevated trust enables us to do certain things that would otherwise be disabled in Silverlight. For example, getting direct access to the file system is not a possibility for a normal in-browser app or a normal out-of-browser app, but a trusted application can do that. There's also native integration, we'll see in a moment, that lets us use things like COM automation to drive external components such as the Office suite. This also, in fact, gives you access to scripting components such as the wscript.shell object available in Windows, which means that in practice, this is a very powerful thing, because that lets you drive all sorts of features of Windows. Also, if you run with elevated trust, some of the restrictions regarding operations that are only available during input handlers are lifted. So there's things that would normally only work if you're in the middle of a click handler can now be invoked anywhere you like if you've got an elevated trust application. So in the case of our example application, one of the areas we'd want to use elevated trust is for sending emails, because we'd like to be able to send confirmation emails to people who've signed up for events through the administrative user interface. So we can do this using the native integration with Outlook to send an email. We can fire up Outlook through its object model and create an email, populate the subject line, the to line, and the body with some boilerplate email, and then let the administrator customize that if they want to before sending it off. And we do this using a couple of features. We use the Automation Factory class, which provides us with the ability to create instances of automatable COM objects, such as the Outlook application class. But we're also using the dynamic keyword introduced in C# version 4. Dynamic is particularly useful when working with type systems and objects that need to decide at runtime which properties they've got. And COM automation falls into that category. The COM automation interfaces are designed to allow dynamic binding to members of objects. And trying to drive that sort of code from a statically typed language is very hard work. And so C# version 4 added this feature specifically to enable easier integration with the Office toolkit, and this is available in Silverlight 4. So here we declare variables of type dynamic, and that enables us just to refer to properties and methods without having to know at compile time whether they're even present or not. Those will all be resolved at runtime. So let's take a look at this in action. Now, for this particular demonstration, rather than running Outlook, I'm going to show launching Excel, because that's also a useful thing you might want to do in a business application. So I've got a big button here labeled Run Excel. And inside of this, I'm going to use the following code. So I'm declaring a dynamic variable to represent my Excel application object. And then I'm initializing that using the automation factory.createObject method, passing in the prog ID, so the textual name of the Excel application class. And then, so we can see that it's working, I'm just going to set the visibility property to true. And obviously we could then go on to use this to create worksheets, to populate cells in worksheets, and build up a complete Excel spreadsheet from scratch. Now for this to work, I need to have done a couple of things. First of all, I need to have a reference to the Microsoft.C# DLL. The dynamic keyword relies on certain behavior to do the runtime binding, and that actually needs to be linked into your ZAP before you have access to this. If you don't add a reference to Microsoft.C#, you'll find that the dynamic keyword just does not compile. But we also need to make sure we've got elevated trust. Native integration is not available to normal applications, so we've got to run out of browser and we have to turn on full trust. So, first of all, let's turn on enable running application out of the browser, and then I'm going to check this require elevated trust when running outside of the browser. So with those two things in place, let's run the application. I'm going to right-click and say, please install this. And now that we're running out of browser with elevated permissions enabled, I can click the button and it will think for a couple of seconds as Excel starts up, and now Excel is visible. And if I went on to write further code, obviously I could use that to do all the things the Excel object model supports.